I didn't come back to Camp Halo for recognition. I came back because someone had to remind the next wave that leadership isn't loud. It's lethal when necessary. They tried to humiliate me during drills. That's the part people never see on the briefings or the plaques. They don't see the part where a staff sergeant drove his knee into my side like he was checking if I was still breakable. "Let's see if it holds," he'd muttered close, just loud enough for the recruits to hear. He meant my ribs. The same ones rebuilt after I was pulled from that crater in Dara's province. I didn't flinch then. I didn't flinch now. There were 20 candidates on that line. None of them knew me. Not really. To them, I was Lieutenant Commander Mariah Keene, clock-punching protocol ghost, back from medical leave, clipboard in hand, stopwatch ticking. Most of them thought that meant I was harmless. They were wrong. The desert around Camp Halo burns even after sunset. Heat bakes itself into the earth and seeps out slow, clinging to boots and bones. You breathe dust, you swallow heat, and you stand tall anyway. That afternoon, I stood at the perimeter of the mobility course, clipboard in hand, stopwatch in the other. No limp, no wince. Even though I could feel the ache under my ribs like a dull hook dragging with every breath. "Keene," Staff Sergeant Brock Calhoun had said earlier, voice sharp as gravel. "You sure you're good to oversee movement drills? Don't want to see you fold in front of the young bloods." I just nodded. I'd learned that kind of challenge didn't need a reply. The desert would speak for me. Eventually, across the field, the recruits were hauling dummies, flipping sand-filled drums, sprinting short bursts under weight. The wind pulled whispers from the scaffolding and stretched them over the dirt. Sweat turned their shirts dark. That's how it's supposed to be. Calhoun didn't just walk the perimeter. He stalked it like it was his personal property. Broad chest, squared shoulders, that clipped beard line always set to smug. His shadow trailed two others, Corporal Ty Malone and Private Evan Drew. One was all muscle, the other all mouth. "Must be nice," Calhoun called out, loud enough for others to hear. Coming back from a cushy recovery stint and getting command over real grunts. Hope paperwork taught you how to breathe through busted ribs. Malone chuckled. Drew just nodded half a beat late, still mimicking. I didn't react. I just kept my pen moving. Not just logging times, cataloging names, stance shifts, proximity violations, even the way Calhoun's boots carved over the lines like punctuation. I felt someone watching me. Private Jules Nia, stationed at the comm tent. Young, sharp-eyed. She'd caught Calhoun's whisper. I saw it in her face, the tight jaw, the flicker of her gaze between us. She expected me to say something. I didn't. Not then. Authority doesn't always need volume. Sometimes it just needs stillness. Calhoun thought silence meant surrender. He didn't realize I'd learned the language of restraint in a place no manual prepared you for. I kept logging data. Waited. Let them show themselves. Because reckoning is quieter than revenge. And it always comes right after someone mistakes calm for weakness. By the second round of drills, the sun dipped low, turning everything gold and hostile. The light didn't ease the heat, it just sharpened it. Shadows stretched long across the course, jagged lines like fault cracks. You could feel the tension humming beneath the sand. I called the next rotation. Weighted carry. Down and back. Maintain form, or your time resets. Boots hit the dirt hard. You could hear the strain in every breath. Not from pain. None of them were hurt yet. But from pressure. Trying to impress. Trying to earn something I hadn't offered. Calhoun ran in the second line. His strides were heavy, built from anger, not rhythm. Malone lagged slightly behind. Drew rushed ahead, grip fumbling on his duffel bag like a man desperate to stay relevant. At the 20-meter mark, Drew slipped. It wasn't dramatic. Just a shift in weight, a hand too loose. His bag tipped, the duffel nearly tumbling into the dust. I moved without thinking. 2 quick steps, caught it midair before it hit the ground. Re-engage your stance, I told him. Calm. Direct. My hand reached for his wrist to guide the weight distribution. And that's when it happened. Calhoun came through from the side. Not just out of bounds, but out of line. No one should have been that close. He broke column formation with one purpose, to hit me. His knee connected square with my left ribs. Clean. Deliberate. The sound wasn't loud, but I felt it, inside. A pop. A shift. That sickening internal crack that tells you something just broke again. I staggered. Not visibly, but inside, everything narrowed. The breath left my body in a hiss through clenched teeth. I didn't scream. Didn't gasp. Just stood still. He leaned in, smug. Whispered so only I and Drew could hear. Let's see if it breaks again. And it had. I knew it. The same rib. Same point of failure from Darius. All over again. The course fell into silence. Even the wind paused. Malone stopped mid-step. Drew's duffel hit the dirt for real this time. Private Jules Nia, still at the comm station, had heard it. The whisper. The impact. I saw it in her posture. The way her body stilled like prey, sensing a predator's shift. I pressed my hand to my ribs. My breathing turned shallow, strategic. Not from weakness, control. Every inhale calculated. Every movement precise. Finish your circuit, I said. They didn't move. Shock, maybe. Or guilt. I said finish it. The tone didn't change, but the weight behind it did. It carried through the field like a blade. They moved. Calhoun crouched, feigning breathlessness. Guess that plate didn't hold, Commander. I looked him in the eye. Didn't blink. Clicked the stopwatch. Jotted a note. Then I turned and walked off the line. 17 steps to the medical bay. I counted each one. Not because I was hurt, because discipline demands detail. My ribs screamed with every step, but I refused to limp. Refused to let the pain show on my face. He wanted to see me broken. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Behind me, Drew bent to pick up his duffel again. I caught the glance he gave Calhoun, a flicker of fear. Doubt. Maybe guilt. Jules didn't move. She didn't need to. The words Calhoun had whispered were already echoing in her mind. So were mine. Because this wasn't over. It had just begun. The medical bay at Camp Halo always felt like a contradiction. Cold tiles and flickering fluorescents pretending they could overpower desert heat. I sat on the edge of the metal exam table, boots still on. One hand on my side. Steady. Bracing. The medic, Corporal Leonard, didn't say much. He didn't need to. The moment he slid the X-ray plate into position and asked me to inhale, he already knew. I tried. The breath caught halfway. A sharp grind of pain spun through my ribs like a blade dragged over bone. The monitor beeped twice. Leonard didn't speak right away, but the look on his face told the truth. The image confirmed it seconds later. 2 fresh fractures. Hairline, but clear. Same rib. Same angle as Darius. Right where the impact had landed. He started to say something. Protocol, medical leave, treatment options, but I cut him off. I'm not here for rest, Corporal. Print the film. Commander, with respect, you shouldn't even be upright. I met his eyes. Just print it. He hesitated, then nodded. I signed the limited duty waiver with a hand that didn't tremble. Declined painkillers. Wrapped the rib tape myself. Each pass a controlled act of defiance. Leonard watched silently, cleaning up the exam tray with quiet precision. When he left, I unbuttoned my shirt just far enough to see the bruise bloom beneath the tape. Purple, black, spreading already across the old scar like a map repeating its warnings. I didn't flinch. Pain, I'd learned, was just another form of data. Data could be managed. What mattered was how you responded to it. For a moment, the white walls of the med bay flickered and turned to the cracked plaster and burning haze of Darius. I remembered the explosion, the collapsed comm tower, and the weight of a corporal's body I had shoved out of the blast zone. I remembered the ribs cracking under the pressure of falling debris, the collapse of one lung, the hiss in my own breathing. But I'd stayed awake. Gave my own medevac coordinates through static and blood. Passed out as a choice, I told the corpsman who later stitched me up. Now I was back, not to prove I hadn't broken, but to show them what it looked like when someone did. And then rebuilt themselves anyway. Outside the medbay curtain, footsteps hesitated. Not boots stomping in. Just a shadow. Watching. Come in or go, I said without looking. Ma'am. I heard him. Came the quiet voice. It was Jules. Still steady, even in that small voice. Every word, she added. I didn't turn around. You've got a good memory, recruit. Yes, ma'am. Then keep it. You'll need it tomorrow. Silence lingered. Then her boots stepped back. I reached for a fresh sheet of paper. Wrote 3 words in bold block letters. Control. Pain. Ego. Underneath, I added. Request reflex evaluation. Range 9. Clearance. Minimal oversight. Nighttime preferred. I signed it. Stamped it. Slid it into the outgoing file tray. No drama. No noise. Just precision. Because the desert wasn't the only thing that remembered. So did I? The sun had vanished behind the canyon ridge by the time the clearance came through. Reflex evaluation, range 9. Blackout conditions. Minimal oversight. Approved. That was all I needed. By 1930 hours, I was in the lower briefing room. My ribs were taped, shirt tucked, posture clean. I walked in like nothing had happened. Because as far as anyone else knew, nothing had, yet. They were already waiting. Staff Sergeant Calhoun lounged in the front row, arms crossed over his chest like a throne. Corporal Malone slouched beside him, posture loose but eyes alert. Drew, hands fidgeting with his earpiece, sat slightly apart, nervous energy dripping off him. Two Navy trainees sat in the back, silent, wide-eyed, and clearly unsure of why they'd been invited. That made 6 names. Just enough. Private Jules Nia sat at the comms console. Earpiece in, recording system synced, clipboard blank and ready. Her fingers hovered over the input key, subtle but firm. I dropped the folder onto the podium, just loud enough to grab attention. Reflex evaluation. Blackout navigation. Range 9. No live fire, I announced. You'll move in staggered pairs. Target. A beacon hidden in the compound. Direct contact only authorizes response. Anything outside protocol will be logged. I looked straight at Calhoun. He smirked. Careful, Commander. Night's a rough time for old bones. You sure you'll stay on your feet? Malone chuckled. Drew didn't. I didn't blink. Darkness reveals timing. And timing reveals discipline. The new recruits took notes like this was any other drill. But Nia knew better. She slid a compact recorder toward me under the console. A backup buffer. One only I'd trigger. Comms open. All channels logged. She whispered as I clipped it into my vest. If they speak, we'll catch it. They will, I replied. Men like that always do. She hesitated. And if they don't? I looked her in the eye. Then we'll let silence show who they really are. By 2200, Range 9 was pitch black. Simulated concrete walls, rusted barrels, broken scaffolds. Every corner of the compound swallowed in darkness. Just a faint red glow from the perimeter towers to keep the outline honest. Calhoun and Malone went in first. Drew followed 10 minutes later with one of the Navy kids. I didn't brief again. I didn't need to. Lines had already been drawn. And tonight, they'd learn what happened when they crossed them. I stood at Point Charlie. Stopwatch ready. Goggles down. I watched their thermal signatures cut through the compound like white ghosts on a black canvas. Their spacing was trash. Calhoun broke corners with no checks. Malone hung back just far enough to feign innocence. Drew's pace jittered, stopping too long, turning too fast. In the ops station, Jules sat still. Earpiece live. Comms buffering every word. The men didn't realize how open they were. Near the south wall, Calhoun's voice crackled over the shared channel. If she comes near me again, I'll finish the job. Make sure those ribs snap clean. A pause. Then Malone's amused reply. Didn't drop her last time. Calhoun again. She'll break. Sooner or later. Everyone does. Jules marked it. Clicked the tag buffer. Logged the timestamp. Then she whispered into her mic, confirmed. That's all I needed. I stepped from behind the barrier, slow and measured. Even breathing hurt. The fractures shifted with each step. But pain wasn't in charge anymore. I was. The lesson had begun. Inside the compound, Calhoun moved like a man convinced the night owed him something. I tracked his heat signature as he breached the shoot house. Old drywall rigged to simulate urban interiors. In the far corner, the beacon pulsed faint red. Malone trailed behind, huffing. Told you it'd be too easy, Calhoun called out, loud enough to echo off the hollow walls. His hand reached lazily for the beacon like it was already his. That's when I stepped into the doorway. No lights. No theatrics. Just my silhouette cutting across the narrow path of red glow. Goggles down. Rifle props slung. Reflex evaluation continues, I said flatly. Engage only on contact. Calhoun froze. His confidence stuttered for just half a second. Then it returned, toxic and overinflated. You sure your ribs can take it, ma'am? He sneered. And then he charged. No command. No hesitation. Just weight and momentum, aimed straight at me. It was predictable. I pivoted, sidestepped, hooked under his elbow, and redirected his body weight into a forward roll. He hit the mat hard. The sound bounced against concrete. He grunted, rolled, came up snarling. You call that protocol? I didn't answer. He came again, this time faster, sloppier. I slipped beneath his arm, caught his wrist, twisted, dropped, and swept his legs out. He hit harder. No one said a word. Malone looked unsure. Drew stood frozen at the chute entrance, watching from behind the broken door frame. I turned to Malone. One contact left. Proceed. He raised his palms. I'm good, he said quickly. Maintain your position. Calhoun was panting now. Pride bruised worse than his ribs. He lunged again, reckless this time, reaching for my collar like he could overpower me with sheer force. I shifted, trapped his arm, locked his wrist into a standing arm bar. Not enough to damage, just enough to control. His shoulder strained. He gasped. Yield or break, I said calmly. He kicked, twisted, tried to escape. Yield, I repeated. Fine. I yield. He spat. I released him instantly. He collapsed to his knees, breathing hard, sweat pooling on the floor. I stepped back, produced the recorder from my vest, and held it in the faint light. Conduct documented, I said. My voice never rose. No anger. No gloating. Just truth. He looked up, rage mixing with panic. You can't use that. This was a setup. You made the threat. You bragged about intent. All I did was evaluate reflex. Jules stepped into the frame behind Drew. Her headset was still live. Her recording still ticking. Recruit, I said. Confirm the channel was open. Yes, ma'am, she said clearly. Confirm his words were recorded. Word for word. Calhoun sagged, defeated. For the first time since the impact that fractured my ribs, I let my hand fall from my side. No more guarding the pain. It was already logged. Consider this contact, I said quietly. Fully documented. And I walked away. 0800 hours sharp. Command room 2. No windows. Just concrete, metal chairs, and silence that made people careful with their words. Captain Elias Bran, senior officer of Camp Halo, sat at the head of the table, gray at the temples, eyes that didn't blink more than needed. He didn't do small talk. Just facts. On my right, I sat straight. Ribs bound, uniform crisp. Clipboard in front of me. No performance. Just presence. Across from me, Calhoun. Arms crossed, scowl set. Still trying to make it seem like this was just a bump in his rise. Malone sat beside him, slouched and still. Outside the room, Drew waited, summoned only as witness if needed. At the far end of the table sat Jules Nia, headset coiled beside a printed transcript. Her jaw didn't twitch. Her back was straight. Captain Brand spoke first. Let's begin with the audio. Jules pressed play. Calhoun's voice spilled through the speakers, clear and slow. If she comes near me again, I'll finish the job. Make sure those ribs snap clean. Malone's voice followed. Didn't drop her last time. Silence stretched long after the clip ended. Brand didn't raise his voice. Recruit. Was this file altered? No, sir. Captured live from field recorder, range 9. Buffered in real time. He nodded, then looked at Malone. Corporal. Malone shifted. He said it, sir. I didn't think he'd actually. You heard the threat and didn't report it? Ah, yes, sir. Brand turned to Calhoun. Do you deny the statement? It was banter. Field talk. You've heard worse. Is that your defense? It was a trap, Captain. She staged the entire drill to make me slip. Brand raised one hand. Calhoun fell silent. He turned to me. Lieutenant Commander Keene. Why no formal report after the initial contact? They would have dismissed it. Laughed it off. I wanted them to remember. You executed the drill under live conditions with fractured ribs. Yes, sir. Was that necessary? It was correct. Brand tapped the transcript once. But you recorded him. I nodded toward Jules. She did. I didn't need paperwork. I needed proof. Brand stood slowly. Intent is confirmed. Assault was followed by a verbal declaration to repeat harm. The drill, though non-traditional, adhered to procedural standards. Reflex response justified. He turned to Calhoun. You are relieved of instructional duty pending review. You are reassigned to non-combat admin effective immediately. No further contact with Commander Keene or her units. Then to Malone. Failure to report a credible threat constitutes complicity. You are removed from the training circuit. Status pending. Finally, to Jules. You followed protocol. Well done, recruit. He turned back to me. You maintained control under pressure. You handled this as few could. I gave a short nod. Thank you, sir. As he moved toward the door, he paused, one hand on the frame. You could still file a formal assault charge. I met his eyes. Already did, I said, tapping the transcript. Just not on paper. He gave a single nod of understanding. Then he left. No ceremony. No fanfare. Just consequence. Exactly as it should be. By noon, the mess hall sounded wrong. Not loud. Not like usual. It was quiet in the way an empty sky gets before a sandstorm. Tense. Waiting. Heavy. Conversations died halfway through sentences. Forks scraped against plates too loudly. People looked over their shoulders without realizing they were doing it. And then Calhoun walked in. Sleeves rolled up like nothing had happened. Same walk. Same smirk. He grabbed a tray, moved through the line like he still ran the place. But no one greeted him. Not Ortega, not Sims, not any of the usual voices who'd once fed his ego. Two Navy recruits leaned closer to each other at their table, whispering. "It's true," one said. He said it over comms. "About breaking her ribs again." Word for word, the other nodded. And she still dropped him. And she didn't even hit first, the first one added. Just waited. Let him make the mistake. Across the hall, Jules sat with her back to the wall. Headset coiled neatly beside her plate. Eyes calm, but watchful. She didn't need to say anything. Everyone knew what she'd done. Sergeant Holt slid into the seat across from her. A man whose uniform bore the creases of 2 Iraq tours and a demeanor that said he'd seen more than he ever bragged about. He stirred his mashed potatoes once, then spoke low. "We've had loud instructors here before. Power junkies. Yellers. The usual." Jules didn't interrupt. "But what she did," he continued, "that wasn't anger. That was a lesson. One we all needed." Jules met his eyes. "You think they'll forget?" He shook his head once. "Not a chance." He sipped his coffee. "I've seen good men snap after being disrespected. Throw punches. Lose control. Burn their careers for a moment of pride." He set the mug down. She didn't swing. Didn't raise her voice. She documented. And let it play out. He looked her in the eye. "That's the difference between reacting and responding. One satisfies anger. The other rewrites the culture." Jules sat still. Let that settle. Across the room, Calhoun sat alone. No one joined him. No one even looked his way. And then the room quieted further, almost instinctively. Because Commander Keen walked in. Same uniform. Same posture. Same calm rhythm of steps. Her ribs were still taped under the fabric. I knew because each breath was shallow, but controlled. Her tray didn't shake. Her back didn't bend. She didn't scan the room. Didn't seek attention. She didn't have to. At her presence, a row of recruits near the entrance straightened their backs. Quiet, but instinctive. Drew kept his eyes down. Malone was nowhere to be seen. As she passed our table, Jules gave a small nod. She returned it. No words. No smile. Just recognition. Two people who'd seen exactly what had been said, what had been done, and understood that justice didn't always shout. Sometimes it just stood taller. I didn't expect applause. Never do. That kind of noise fades fast. But silence. Silence sticks. Silence replays in people's heads at night. Silence forces them to examine what they thought they understood about control and where they've mistaken calm for permission. As I passed through the mess, every chair seemed to shift just slightly straighter. Not out of fear. Not even respect, really. Something deeper. Awareness. I sat alone, as I often did. Ate methodically. Every movement exact. The ribs ached, but I refused to show it. Pain could scream all it wanted, but I had long since learned how to mute it behind my discipline. From my table, I caught sight of the 2 youngest recruits, Tenny and Roe. They were whispering, trying to act like they weren't watching me. But I could feel it. Not judgment. Not gossip. Curiosity. The kind that shifts into a lesson before you even know you've learned it. Jules sat a few tables away, not pretending to eat, just sitting with her comms gear neatly coiled beside her and her eyes calm, anchored. A recruit from logistics passed me, muttered, "Ma'am," and kept walking. She didn't linger. I knew what was happening now. Not a spectacle. A shift. Calhoun wouldn't be teaching again. His reassignment was effective immediately. He'd push paper for a while until the consequences caught up with the paperwork. Malone, complicit through silence, was already off the evaluation circuit. No official ceremony. Just reassignments. But word spreads faster than memos ever do. And the message had landed. No one said her name, but they didn't need to. They'd already stopped calling her liability Keen behind her back. That label had evaporated the moment she'd stood her ground, not with noise, but with strategy. I didn't just take a knee to the ribs and respond. I rewrote the context. And the context is what gets remembered. What recruits were whispering now wasn't about revenge. It was about standard. How a woman walked into the dark with broken ribs and came out with her dignity unshaken and her authority unquestioned. A few more steps in this compound, a few more long stairs, and it would become something else entirely. Not legend. I don't believe in that word. Legacy. And legacy doesn't come from hitting back harder. It comes from never letting them make you smaller than you are. Evening patrol drills cycled through the yards. Cadences echoed from the south range. Rhythmic boots stomping in synchronized pride. But inside Operations Wing 2, things were quieter. That was how I preferred it. I walked the corridor alone, clipboard in hand, heading toward the officer archive. On my way, I passed 3 recruits huddled by the vending unit. They broke apart when they saw me. Not out of guilt, but out of instinct. They didn't want to be caught slouching. Didn't want to be seen doing anything less than sharp. That was new. My presence didn't demand fear. It demanded better. 2 weeks ago, some of those same recruits had been laughing when Calhoun mocked my injury during drills. Now, they couldn't meet my eyes without squaring their shoulders. As I filed the day's evaluations, I heard Jules's voice echo faintly from the back corner. She was reviewing comms recordings with another tech, one of the new intake officers from Bravo Company, explaining how tagging worked, how buffer stamps aligned with real-time telemetry. She didn't mention what had happened. She didn't need to. It was already in the system. And more importantly, it was in the air. Later that evening, as dusk settled over Camp Halo, I sat on the edge of my bunk, taping my ribs again. The fracture hadn't healed yet, not completely. It still barked when I turned too fast or inhaled too deep. But I never needed painkillers. Just tape, breath, and memory. Memory of Rear Valley, of the building collapse, of the way my ribs had first snapped beneath debris and shrapnel, the way my lungs had gurgled with blood while I called in my own extraction through a broken comm. That had been worse than this. And if I'd walked away from that, Calhoun's knee had nothing on me. But this wasn't about pain. This was about what pain reveals. Not just in the one bearing it, but in those watching. Jules had watched. Turner had watched. And now others were learning, too. That discipline wasn't a volume setting. It was a system, one they'd underestimated until they saw what it looked like when Control walked through fire and didn't flinch. The morning came without fanfare. No announcements. No new postings. But the mood across Camp Halo had changed. I saw it in the way instructors glanced up when I entered a room. In how recruits moved a little sharper on drills. In the fact that Calhoun's name wasn't spoken anymore. Not as an example to follow, but as a caution. He hadn't been discharged yet. The review was still pending. But everyone knew. Everyone had heard the playback. Not because I spread it, but because the system had. And because I made sure silence wasn't used as a weapon anymore. Later that day, I was asked to lead a leadership protocol seminar. Unusual request, especially from command, considering the bruises hadn't fully faded beneath my uniform. I accepted. When I stood at the front of that hall, 30 pairs of eyes locked on me. Some still skeptical. Most curious. A few already changed. I didn't open with rank or war stories. I didn't mention Calhoun. I didn't name the bruise. I just told them this. Control is not silence. It's what you do when the volume doesn't need to rise, because the standard already has. They didn't nod, but they didn't look away either. Afterward, Jules caught up to me in the corridor, clipboard under her arm, headset still coiled tight. She didn't say much, just walked beside me for a few seconds before asking quietly, "Would you have stayed silent if he hadn't bragged?" I paused, then looked at her. No, but I needed the silence to be broken by him, not me. That's the difference between proof and accusation. She nodded. Discipline hits harder than revenge. I smiled just a little. Discipline lasts longer. At dinner, I passed through the mess again. No one stood. No one clapped. But half the room straightened their backs. That was enough. At the door, I paused. Not for effect, just long enough to catch a breath. And maybe a thought. I said softly to no one in particular. Pain fades. Conduct stays on record. And I walked out. No war cry. No parade. Just the weight of a lesson. Sometimes, we don't raise our voices when we're disrespected. We raise the bar. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.